Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
I want to really get now back to Jeffrey Reynolds, I've been having a great conversation with while we're waiting to put him on. And thank you, Jeffrey, for coming here this morning.
Thank you, Anita. It's so nice to be on the air with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I have a book that it's all about, well, it's a book about judges in a sense and politics, but more importantly, it's written by an attorney himself who knows the judicial system a lot. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about why you thought that you wanted to write a book after all the hard work that you did in law.
Well, I had been appointed an administrative law judge for child support hearings, and I was intrigued by judges. After law school, I did judicial law clerks. I worked at the Supreme Court of the state of New Mexico for the first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court of New Mexico, Mary Walters. And then I worked at the district court, which is equivalent to the circuit court in Florida, the trial court. And I worked there doing all the murder cases, all the high-profile civil cases, all the really important cases that came up in the Albuquerque area. After that, I was selected to work in the federal court, and that is the highest court in New Mexico. And we had prison riots then in the state penitentiary, in which 33 inmates were killed in the prison riots. And I got called in to do the pro se writ work, which was the inmates suing the governor and the prison system for the injuries that they sustained, the violation of their civil rights, all of those problems that resulted, and their families suing the court systems for the deaths of their sons in the prison riot.
Well, you sound like you could be an expert brought into what are we doing with incarceration. And, you know, there's the big story. Of course, everyone talks about that. The jails are filled with the wrong people, and that's probably another subject. Let's not get into that. What I think that what really attracted me to your story is that you really care about the children and the mothers who are being betrayed in a way, that the husbands, the fathers, for some reason, and it's not all fathers, don't think that after they're divorced that they have any more responsibility.
Yes, that's exactly right. What happens is that in child support work, the federal government has funded child support judges across the country and set up, with the aid of the states, bureaus to collect child support, because men walk away from support of their children, and the children are forced on the welfare rolls. And as a result, the federal government has gone after these fathers. They're called deadbeat dads. That's the term out there. And the deadbeat dads don't pay their child support. It's not about the wife anymore. They're divorced, and the husbands and wives are separated. But fathers have an obligation, both financially and morally, to their children, and they have to support them. It's not up to the taxpayers to support the children of fathers who are alive and capable and willing to work.
Well, how do we, okay, and I know it's very separate. Alimony and child support, a very separate issue.
Very different. The alimony, which is in the divorce, that's part of the divorce hearing. That's part of the circuit court decision to make the decision about alimony. But child support is an entirely separate matter, and it's determined in the divorce. But once the father fails to meet that obligation on a continual basis, then it was sent over to me, and I was the judge who had to determine what was going to happen. Now, in my case, I had people who were very powerful who were not paying child support. I sentenced an aide to a U.S. senator to jail for 6 months for not paying child support. You cannot walk away from your children. If you bring children into this world, you are obligated to support them, whether or not your marriage fails or goes on.
Tell me what the aide, this powerful man, what were his reasons?
He was an alcoholic, and he owed $76,000 in back child support. In the course of 20 years, he made only one $500 payment when the child was 5 or 6 years old and had an appendicitis attack and had to have her appendix out. In all the remaining years of her youth, he did not make one payment. That's intolerable. That's not fair to the child. My concern is not with the mother. My concern is with the children. I am obligated and sworn to protect those children. And that is the important thing, that children have the financial support to go ahead and have the necessities of life. That was what my job was concerned with.
And I can see just from, he gets very emotional about this. He really believes this a lot. Let me tell you about the book. That's why I think you need to really go to Amazon. You can look it up, Justice Betrayed. It's a novel by Jeffrey David Reynolds. And let me just, if I may, let me read what on the back of the book. It says, a murder trial, a jury deliberating intensely on the death penalty, venal political corruption, and a staunch investigation set the stage for this story of two judges. One is a respected, seasoned veteran of the bench who has risen from Magistrate Court Judge to District Court and then to the Chief Justiceship of the state's Supreme Court. The other, a young administrative law judge, riveted by his duty, immovable, and undeterred by enticement or violence, and unwilling to be silenced or swerve him from his sworn oath to uphold the law. Now, let me just tell you, I got to start reading this because Jeffrey is going to be the author of the book. Justice Betrayed will be the book of the month in July. So I started reading the novel, and I can just tell you, I have some ideas who you are in this book. I know you're never authors who write novels. They're just little bits and pieces of people in there. But I think that you are very passionate about what you believe. You there's good guys and there are bad guys in this. And I really understand after talking with you how you feel, of course, about the fathers, the men. But even more than that, I was thinking, so if someone isn't paying child support, they're not getting to see their child either because they don't want to do it. And so the child is losing in a lot of ways.
Yes, but really the fact is you can get visitation. Visitation and child support are two separate issues, so they can see their children. Many of the wives, however, took the position, if you don't pay child support, I'm not going to let you see the children. And that's one of the cases in my book where the man says, my wife hasn't let me see the children in 3 years. I'm not paying any money. And that became an issue. And I had to explain to that man, that respondent in court, that his obligation to pay child support was separate from his issue of visitation. That if he wanted the issue of visitation revisited, he had to go back to district court, circuit court, and get that issue resolved in his divorce, but that my jurisdiction extended only to his child support, and that he was obligated, whether he saw the children or did not see the children, to pay and support his children. But the wives had no right, and they would lose in court, to cut off visitation. They cannot cut off visitation with the fathers.
Oh, see, now I didn't know that. Now you can imagine how that woman would feel if the father wants to see the child but is not paying for it either. I mean, that's strange to me, the two.
They're not connected. They're two separate issues. Visitation is one issue, and child support is another issue. As long as the father is not a threat to the children, it will not put the children in any danger. He is entitled to see his children.
Okay, let's say that the woman remarries. Now we're really getting into some court here. The woman remarries and she marries someone who has enough money and he takes care of the child. The other man, the father, still has that right unless he goes back to court.
He's still obligated to support his own children. Just because the other man wants to contribute to the support of the children does not lift the burden from the father. The father is obligated to support his children. But in addition, she cannot cut off his visitation even if the new husband wants to support the children. The father is entitled to both visitation and obligated to child support. Neither of those rights can be abrogated.
And how long is that till the child is 18?
18.
Now, see, that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of, what you've just told us here today.
The other thing
Excuse me, is this a national? This is federal law. This isn't state by state.
This is state by state.
Oh, it is.
But that's generally the basic law across the United States, that child support and visitation are two separate issues.
What's the name that you called about fathers? What's that?
Deadbeat dads.
Deadbeat dads. Now, with women making a lot of money, things have changed. Is it true, the same thing, that if a divorce occurs, that a woman has to support the children?
No. The husband is still obligated to meet his child support obligations. He has obligations to his children, and he must support them.
Okay. I'm going to give you an instance. Let's say a man is an ill father. He's sick in many ways, not alcoholism, but let's say some other problem. And the wife works and she can afford to do it. When the divorce occurred, you as a judge couldn't have switched it and said, okay, that the mother is obligated to support the children?
There are some instances where the husband would get custody of the children.
Ah.
And then the wife was obligated to pay child support.
Okay.
But that's very rare.
Is it?
It doesn't happen frequently. I mean, in your own experience, how often does the husband get custody of the children? Now the new thing is joint custody. That's the new thing. Both parents have equal custody. But by and large, one parent lives with the children all the time, and it tends to be the wife. And it tends, when the divorce happens, generally the children and the wife live at a lower standard of living than they had lived at when they were married. And that's why it's so essential for the husband to meet his child support obligations.
You make it so clear. You must have been a wonderful judge, and I can understand why all this was so impassioned in you that you had to write a book about this.
Oh, thank you.
You know, but of course, you seem like a very gentle soul, and there's a lot of murder and stuff going on in this book.
Yes.
How did you get up to that?
The murders are actual murders taken from New Mexico that I was involved in. In one of my hearings, I also did what was called temporary restraining orders. Temporary restraining orders is a device to get a husband or a boyfriend, especially people who are not married are entitled to this protection too, to get them out of the house so that no violence, no domestic violence occurs upon the woman. I was not present in this murder. It was the day before I was to appear in the Taos County Courthouse in Taos County, New Mexico. And the judge sat in for me. The judge signed the temporary domestic violence order to remove the boyfriend from the house. The woman came into the courthouse. You don't need the husband or boyfriend present. She presents the case to the judge. She said he had guns in the house. She was frightened. She was scared. He'd beaten her before. Could the judge impose an order on him? The judge did. He signed the order. The woman walked out of the courtroom into the atrium of the courthouse, and he shot her dead. He walked into the courthouse with a gun and shot her dead right in the courthouse. He then proceeded back to the residence, picked up his rifles and weapons, and before he left that house, a state trooper pulled up to the house. He shot him dead also. That story is in the book. It's a true story. It did happen.
It happens a lot with women and men. And I have to say that and I told you before we got on the show that I had a personal life with someone who was really very frightened about that would do some harm. And I absolutely, after I got divorced, I still worried about it and never saw him again. I stayed away from him because there's a craziness in people sometimes when they have it in their mind, because you become property.
Yes.
You become property. And so when you just told me that story, I understand that. And that's why a lot of women wind up in these places where no one knows where they are.
Domestic violence shelters.
Yeah, shelters. It's hard to believe, but it does happen. And it's because people become mentally attached to what's right.
There's another part of the book where the jury is sitting out in another murder case, which I was involved in. I was intimately involved in this murder case. And the jury has to determine whether this DEA agent, undercover, who worked for the DEA and was the most successful DEA undercover agent in the state, commits a murder under the influence of drugs, because being an undercover agent, you have to sample the drugs. You cannot make undercover buys without sampling the drugs. And he was in a paranoid state, and he killed his wife. And the jurors who made the deliberation in this case, two of the women on the jury, if you read the book, had been beaten by their husbands. They couldn't talk about it because it was a small town, and in a small town, you don't say, my husband beat you. It's a secret that you lock in your breast, that you don't share with your neighbors, you don't share with your minister, your rabbi, you don't share it at all. And when that happens, that colors their approach.
And so that when they were asked to be on the jury, no one ever shared, is what you're saying. So when they went, they did commit him. Then they did find him guilty, didn't they?
Well,
let's not tell anybody.
I'll let you have the book.
You have to read the book. Sorry, that's right. You have to read the book, Justice Betrayed. But so you really you've had a sampling of a lot of real life, haven't you?
Yes, I've been very lucky. I really wanted to be at the vortex of the legal process, and being a judge myself and being around judges really put me in the middle. I didn't have to advocate, but I saw both sides of an issue, and I got to be privy to many of the inside documents, many of the confessions, many of the police reports, the pre-sentence reports that were not made public, that were never going to be public record. I got to see them. I got to read them and examine them, and then I got to write decisions for the judges, that the judges would say, I want to decide this way. And then I would go and write a decision, a draft decision, not a final decision, because that's the judge's duty. But I would write a draft decision incorporating what the judge wanted to find, to do the research, and then the judge would look at it, make corrections, make additions, but they made their decisions, and I was just an instrument of the judge's decisions.
I always wondered about judges and how they can sleep at night, because it must be very hard for them. They control people's, in so many instances, life or death, or change of life, or lots of things. It's a very important and very scary, I think, anyway, profession.
It is a very difficult profession. And what I saw, I really felt I was blessed, and I really felt honored and privileged to have the positions that I had. The judges that I knew, by and large, were men who lived their lives honestly, conservatively, outside the blare of newspaper or publicity, who tried to the best of their ability, with all that they were given, both intellectually and morally, to make honest, honorable decisions, day by day, year by year, week by week, in the cases that appeared before them. And it's really something. when I finally was elevated to sit in front of someone and to say, do I put this person in jail? Do I take from this person his liberty? Do I make this person pay money? These are not easy decisions. I have seen men, criminals, convicted of crimes, who, when faced with 20 or 30 years in the state penitentiary, became nothing like weeping babies. They became weeping babies when faced with that judge, looking them in the eye and telling them that their next 20 or 30 years was going to be spent in the state penitentiary. It's amazing how a tough hombre becomes a crying baby when faced with that kind of reality.
Right. I mean, I can see that myself. I mean, it's funny. My mother was a wonderful woman, and one thing she said to me, always live your life as though if you wouldn't want it on the front page of the newspaper. She always used to say that, then don't do it. You know?
Your mother gave you good advice.
She did, because I would always say, gee, well, I was like on the edge. Okay, I better not do that. Right?
Now you're only on the cover of Boomer Times.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. But Jeffrey, this is fascinating for me. And I was just going to, as you were saying that, I was going to ask you, was your life ever in danger? Did you feel that people were trying to maybe get you to think in a different way?
I've tried to stay low profile. I mean, you put people in jail, they have a memory of you. I don't want anyone coming around looking for me. I think that many judges feel that they've made important criminal law decisions, and after they leave the bench or they retire, they want to put that behind them. They may love the law still. They may want to dabble a little or mediate or do certain things in the law, but that part of the law they want to put behind them. Now, your second part of your question, did I ever feel I was in danger? Not particularly, except when there was really a tough hombre in front of me. There is, I'm certain, in every courtroom in the country and in my courtrooms that I sat in, and I sat in 11 counties, and all 11 counties had a little buzzer under the bench. I don't think people know this, but there's a little buzzer under the bench that if you are in jeopardy, you push the buzzer, and the sheriff's deputies and bailiffs, armed bailiffs, come into the courtroom. It's mentioned in the book, but that's one of the things. Now, with temporary domestic violence orders, that's the most dangerous part of the law, and I'll tell you why. When you take a husband and tell him he can no longer go home to his home, that he has to leave his wife and children, you're just pouring gasoline on an open fire. And that is dangerous, especially if the wife is in the courtroom and he is there. You are really looking at trouble, and I always had an armed bailiff in the courtroom at that time.
Well, you can see why I loved having Jeffrey on our radio show. This is actually the first show I've ever done like this, so I love it. And we will have you back, of course, after we review your book and put it in Boomer Times in July. But this is a taste of something that I wanted you to have. So it's called Justice Betrayed. I mean, you can buy the book now. You don't have to wait for me to review it. Jeffrey David Reynolds. Go to Amazon.com, and I know you'll love it. I mean, it is just like this program. I mean, he's a very, very good writer. I must say he's clear. And one thing I like is your chapters are short. One, and there was another. Before you know it, you just keep moving on. So thank you. It's really been wonderful having you on our show this morning.
Thank you, Anita. It's been nice being with you.
Right, and I know that we'll be back to you another time. And I'm going to say hello to your mother. I don't know if she's listening, but anybody in their 80s, I love them. So we'll be taking care of selling as many Justice Betrayed books as we can. And some of you may just get a chance to meet Jeffrey. We're going to have our Boomer Expo in July, and we will, of course, feature his book there among some of the other books we have, too. So thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Anita. Nice to be with you this morning.